once more, thank you very much for being with us today. I would jump into straightforward into the first question that we have for you that I hope also will give you the chance to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience. So we would really like to know basically how, in a way, your design leadership style have influenced your CDO experiences at companies like PayPal and Capital One, and if you can recall some particular moments in your career that define, let's say, in a way, your design leadership style.
Ciao, Paula. Ciao, everyone. Thank you for having me here. So I would say my leadership style really started with my first job, which was at Kodak. And I was working with some incredibly talented designers and equally talented, business partners. And what I was seeing was designers often being misunderstood, and business leaders then being misunderstood by designers. And I found myself often in the role of translator between groups of people, and really noticed that I had, I think, an affinity for creating an environment where design could create great work, and an environment where we could really align groups of people. At the end of the day, it was clear that everyone had the same goals, but we were all coming at it with, from different perspectives and with different language. So it was about bringing those groups of people together towards that. The other thing that that I noticed early on and has continued through now is I actually feel like leadership is no different than design in how I approach it, right? It starts with having empathy and curiosity towards the people that you work with. So thinking about where are they coming from, what are their goals, what are they trying to achieve? If I'm working with a business leader, what's keeping them up at night? Right? What are, like, again, the things that they really care about? And then figuring out how do you actually create that space to then ideate towards solutions together so that it's meeting all of our goals. And usually, again, those are shared goals. We just may articulate them differently. A business leader may be talking about revenue, a designer may be thinking about customer needs. At the end of the day, they're both still in service of delivering value for that customer, which in turn, results in revenue for the company. But it's creating, again, that environment, bringing some of our tools to the table to help bring groups together and help them communicate with each other better.
Thank you, Daniela. I mean, this is super interesting. And thinking back, let me say, at your experience in PayPal, basically, when you were the first CDO, meaning the first person in the organization with this role. We would be curious to know, how did you feel to be the first, and how did you deal with the newness of the role within the organization? So how did you manage the situation, and what did you learn from it?
Yeah, so what was interesting about, having that title or that label at PayPal and being the first is that it really came as a recognition of a role that I had already been playing. So if we rewind back to, many years even before I joined PayPal, PayPal had a long history of having design as a central function. So it helped that I was already in a company that recognized the importance of how, having that discipline centralized, of investing in the discipline by having a design leader that's accountable for that function. And so when I joined, and that had been true for 20 years already, I felt this incredible responsibility to make sure that I actually continued to demonstrate that value, right? So that, like, it wouldn't get questioned. Having been in other places where design would go through that pendulum of being a centralized function, sometimes being decentralized and interspersed into the business. So I had already come in with that mindset. I do feel like there's value in design being centralized. And when I joined, I had the core design team that worked on PayPal. So the things that, many of you might be used to seeing in terms of PayPal products and features in Italy. But the company had acquired a few companies and continued to acquire many other companies during the 7 years that I was there. And those teams weren't reporting into me. So one of the things that happened was I came in again respecting and honoring the fact that we were a centralized function, and I was, responsible for the caretaking of this function. But I've always believed that the best way for design to actually have impact is to be deeply embedded into the business. So the way that we organized and the way that we set up our operating model was my teams were, dotted line reporting into my business partners. They were co-located where possible with business and engineering. They spent, I would always say, you spend more of your time with your business and engineering teams than you do with the rest of the design organization. And that's how it should be. Because if we're not sitting alongside them, that means we're not part of crucial conversations. We're maybe coming in too late to the process. And we're seen as more of a service organization. So that deeply integrated, deeply embedded model really helped because our designers could develop business understanding. Our business partners actually could see the value that design was bringing to the table. And it made them much more comfortable with then taking those teams from acquisitions that weren't part of my organization and moving them under me, because they knew that from a day-to-day perspective, it wouldn't really change anything, right? They weren't going to disappear into a vacuum once they joined the design organization. It would still operate the same way, but they would have the benefit of leveraging our design standards and our design reviews and having me and the leaders in design looking after the careers of the designers on the team. So it was a win-win situation. So once those teams then got moved under me and I essentially then had all of design reporting to me at PayPal, that's when the chief design officer title came around. So it was really, I think, a recognition of the credibility that we had with the business, that the fact that, yes, I looked after design, I set standards and everything, but did it in a way that was highly effective in working with all of the parts of our business.
Great. This is super interesting. Thank you. Thank you very much. And continuing into this direction, you partially already said that, but as Chief Design Officer, you work laterally across functions. Okay, so considering this, we would like to hear about the factors that can enhance the dialogue and the acceptance of design initiatives across the organization and the different functions. Is there any anecdotes that you can share with us where you had to deal with such circumstances? And above all, let's say an example of difficult trade-off you had to navigate with other departments, and how did you solve them?
Yep, absolutely. So again, it's about figuring out, you may have specific design goals or opportunities that we see, but then coupling those with where you see the highest leverage for the business. So an example that I'll share, at a prior company, we had this very large customer base and hundreds of millions. That base was growing, but we would see that they would only use one or two products. At the same time, the company was, always adding more products, adding more features, adding more services. So they had this big focus on how do we help customers adopt more than one product. On the design side, over the years, as we had to add more of these products into our application, we were like, oh, the design isn't great, right? The application feels really bloated. The information architecture isn't working. We really need to rethink this. It's hard for customers to get tasks done. It's hard for them to find what they need. Now, had we gone out and said, hey, we need to invest a bunch of our time and engineering time to fix the information architecture, maybe some people would have listened. More likely, most would have been like, well, we're not really sure that that's a priority for us, right? So again, it went back to like speaking the right language. And the minute that we were like, hey, we have all of these wonderful products and features that we want our customers to discover, but the design of our application currently doesn't help with that goal for these reasons, then everyone is, immediately paying attention, because we're again speaking to a business opportunity that they were already seeing. We got, the project funded. It actually was the biggest priority for the year. We were able to redesign the app, and to prove out the value of design and actually helping to achieve these business goals while also improving customer experience. So I think that it's always like having this understanding of, what is the business worrying about, And again, figuring out how to position and frame the work in a way that is much more understandable, that isn't purely coming from a design perspective, where they may not necessarily see the reason or the value in what we were proposing. This is just one example of many, but I find that going back to that same tactic over and over invariably works really well.
Wow, interesting. And changing a little bit the perspective, let me say. So dealing with design and more in general with innovation means moving into uncertainty. And most of the time, in order to manage this uncertainty, even to deal with risk, okay, and even taking some risk to innovate. So we would like to know basically how do you deal with this risk when you need to innovate, and how do you support others in your team and in the organization take and manage that risk and avoid in a way resistances that might emerge?
So this was an interesting question when I was thinking about it, and one of the benefits or privileges that I have is that I've mostly worked in digital contexts, and one of the beauties of working in digital contexts is that we have access to data. And data can be a really powerful way of managing risks, be it qualitative, quantitative, live customer data, user research that we do along the way. So one of the tactics that we employ quite often is, first of all, being very customer centric, but really instilling in everyone, all of the cross-functional team members that are working on a project, a learning mindset, and actually having a very intentional learning agenda. And what I mean by that is, you might start with discovery, make sure that the team captures what do we know about the current customer behaviors? What don't we know that we need to go learn more? Do we have a clear hypothesis on the problem that we're trying to solve? And if so, how are we going to measure it along the way? So that starts feeding into what we call this learning agenda. It's an evergreen tool that we keep updating as we're going. And then as you're going through the project, do very intentional check-ins where you can actually say hey, what do we feel like we know really well? And we're comfortable launching this product. What do we still need to validate? And what's the best way to validate it? What are still big unknowns? What questions, do we still need to answer before we actually feel confident? And then what are things that perhaps we actually won't know the answers to the questions until we launch? And then because we all work in complex organizations with multiple stakeholders, then being super transparent about these are the things that we were able to validate along the way that we actually feel pretty comfortable about. These are things that we won't know about until the product is in the hands of customers. And then perhaps doing some scenario planning, right? Of if we don't see adoption of, this specific feature, et cetera, here's how we'll respond to it. Here's what we can do. So really leaning into leveraging customer data. And I think just having this alignment and transparency around what do we know, what do we not know? And for the things that we don't know, how are we going to go and find out, prove, disprove a specific hypothesis? So that has been, my go-to and our go-to in these environments, and it helps tremendously to be able to leverage data to de-risk decisions.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. I mean, this is very, very interesting. And coming to our, let's say, last question just before to open the floor to possible answers. You partially already answered to this. So this is really to take the key points from what you just told us today. So basically, most of the time, I mean, to succeed as leaders, designers need to bring strong individual point of view while fostering collaboration at the same time. So we would like to know, in a way, in your experience, how can design leaders strike this balance and ensure that their unique perspective is recognized as they proactively work to bring in many partner perspectives at the same time?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's very situational and, we can do this in a number of ways, but I'll share two very, very specific examples of things that I've seen work really well and that I go back to quite often. They both come at it from different perspectives and I think utilize a different skill set that we all have in design. The first one is running workshops. So, I've been doing this for many, many years, I think well before design thinking or design sprints were in vogue. But where, again, you're bringing groups of people together with some sort of agenda. You might be starting with looking at insights, right? Let's look at what we know about the market, what we know about customers. You might actually have some ideation built in, but it's really drawing on our ability to facilitate groups of people and extrapolate, I think, the best thinking of everyone in the room. And using, many of our exercises that we have for brainstorming, for flaring, for narrowing, for forming hypotheses. So I find that really helpful, both in sometimes you have that opportunity to do that at the beginning of a project where maybe you're still trying to figure out like what is the problem to solve. It's also really helpful, I have found, when you might notice that perhaps different groups of people aren't fully aligned. Again, they might be aligned, but in their own way. So they're not all speaking the same language and having that same customer problem that, is at the center of everything that will inform an initiative. So running these, and they don't have to be. One mistake that I've seen over the years is sometimes we want to do the perfect workshop process and we'll try to convince stakeholders of like, let's get in a room for 5 days straight and do this workshop. And if it's their first time having design facilitate one of these, that may seem like an overwhelming amount of time to invest. And so what I say is like start with like bite-sized workshops. Even if you get people like for 2 hours in a room, you can actually accomplish a lot. And usually they'll leave wanting more. So that's one of the guidances that I give to my team is like meet your partners where they're at. And if you can only get 2 hours, get 2 hours of product engineering, legal, risk, everyone in a room and see how much you can get done during that time. And then as you build more of that credibility and that reputation, you can do like a full week-long design sprint with them. The other one is almost the inverse of that, which is, we have this unique skill in business to be able to visualize end states. So again, I don't suggest doing this in isolation. I think it's always really good to involve partners in that process. But usually what we will do is when we're trying to really push vision or innovation and have something really tangible that shows what could be, we will do a process where we actually say, let's come up with a video, a demo, whatever it might be, where we, show what a user experience might look like. And what we'll do is we'll write a script for what we need to visualize in that video or demo, and we'll involve partners in the script writing, right? Because that will be a lot easier for them to contribute. So we'll literally actually say, Maria is trying to use this product, they're coming in, they're doing this, they're doing that, and like have partners actually like in that document help with the script so that they're helping with ideation, but not necessarily like, giving us suggestions of how to visualize it, how to edit a specific frame of the video. And again, that just drives alignment and at the same time gets everyone super excited about the destination state and then utilizes our skills of being able to visualize and illustrate that, which can really help get folks aligned and really inspired and excited about what they're working towards.
Great, thank you. This is super, super interesting. Thank you very much. So I would leave, let's say, the floor to the questions coming to the audience. We collected a few while we were talking, Daniela. So the first question that the most voted one, actually, the one that gets most attention, it's interesting because it's really personal. Now we talk about how you as leader can involve others, deal with others, but this question is like, how would you suggest us to train our leadership skill in our everyday practice? So how can we train ourselves?
That's I love that question because I think we're all leaders, right? And you always have opportunities to show up as a leader. One of the things that that I find is really powerful and has always been helpful to me personally, and I really advise my team on is respect and honor the fact that you might be in a context because of your design skills. So that's the unique reason why you're there, the unique skills that you have, but don't just show up as a designer or as a design leader. So be interested in all aspects of the business, show ownership in all aspects of the business, show interest, contribute to conversations that go well beyond design. Because to me, that's what leadership is, right? Is like at the end of the day, you're feeling accountable for all of the outcomes of the business, not just for the piece that you might feel you're directly contributing to. So that's one way, and that means building business understanding, demonstrating curiosity. So I joined Capital One last year. As I was onboarding, I asked a bunch of questions of everyone that I was meeting with to understand aspects of our business, everything from very basic things of like, oh, how do we make money with that specific product and business, to, what are the legal implications? What are the regulatory implications that I need to be aware of? To what are the engineering constraints? So that again, when I'm showing up in any kind of interaction, I can, yes, of course, show up and represent, my job as a design leader, but I can also contribute beyond, my role as design. And I feel like over and over again, that's when then people start seeking you out because they're interested in your perspective. They're not only seeking you out when they have a design question, but they're like, hey, I have this business idea. I'm working on this strategy. Can you take a look? Can you contribute? So that's one. The second one that I mentioned already many times is, again, being a facilitator is an incredible way to show up as a leader. And it also doesn't mean you need to know the questions. You just need to facilitate a group of people towards getting questions answered. So volunteering for those opportunities or seeing opportunities where you're seeing groups of people stuck because maybe they're not getting aligned, and you can be like, hey, let me get up on the whiteboard. Let's jot down like what we're all saying here. Let's find out like where we're getting stuck, what we're not feeling great about. So again, I think those facilitation opportunities are another really great way to show leadership.
Great. Thank you very much. And even the next question is super interesting because it is about how do you keep developing your design skills by being a C-level that would entail more managerial activity, for instance? How do
That's
you keep developing your design skills in this environment?
yeah, that's a really good question. Obviously, I don't design anymore and haven't in many years. I'm not spending my days in, Figma creating designs, but I do spend quite a bit of time with design work in a couple of ways. One, design reviews. So we have design reviews for all of our critical projects. So spend several hours a week looking at the work, providing feedback. And the benefit of actually not being a designer is that I'm able to see patterns across the work that we're creating. I'm also able to develop a collection of best practices where I'll be like, well, I remember 2 years ago we did X over here, and this approach worked really well, right? And then I'm able to tell my teams, doing this kind of design or this sort of onboarding flow generally tests really well for this type of product. So it's much more in terms of giving guidance and giving advice to teams. Then the second part is I also choose one or two projects that are really important to the business and that have where design plays an outsized level of importance. And I am in those projects as well. So I'll be really close to those projects. I'm very close to problem solving, ideating, etc. So while I may not be like drawing screens, at the end of the day, I'm still really contributing to shaping those experiences.
Great. So basically, you take small area, but where you try to contribute really in depth in a
That's
way.
right.
So
Yes,
yeah.
and then broadly on everything else through design reviews.
Okay, that's super interesting. Uh, The following question that pop up is a little bit provocative, let me say, but so we are interested to know your perspective on this, and it is basically how do you maintain your enthusiasm and focus on end customer and their need while basically within the organization, all the stakeholders around you might be driven most by cynical goal or protecting their own area and trying to expanding their own power. So how do you keep this trade-off between dealing with the customer and the political things that happen within the organization?
Yep. No, I keep provocative questions coming. Love those. But maybe it will be a disappointing answer because in my opinion, that's not a trade-off. But it requires some peeling of the layers, right, of that onion. And what I mean by that, like if we just think back about like how a business comes to exist, oftentimes it's because someone actually had a hypothesis that there was a customer problem that could be solved in a better way, right? And that could be turned into a business. And that's how most businesses originate, right? So usually at the heart of being a successful business is solving customer problems better than someone else. So I believe that if you can actually show that to the stakeholders that might be trying to protect or grow, whatever it is that they're responsible for, you both have the same goals. It's just that you're coming at it from different perspectives. So if you're able to actually show that, hey, we're seeing this opportunity here, we hear from customers, we observe that customers are having a pain point here, and we believe that if we're able to solve that, we will see higher engagement with our products, we will be able to acquire more customers, then you're immediately being able to tie it into their goal. So you're like, okay, we're actually solving the same goals. Like it isn't necessarily an either or in most cases. So that's what I mean by peeling the onions. I think if you can like figure out those questions of like, okay, so they're really focused on growing revenue. I may actually have a recommendation for how they can grow revenue. I just need to speak to it that way so that, again, they understand that I'm not saying like, no, let's solve for the customer, forget your goal of revenue, right? Those are one and the same, just two sides of the same coin.
Fantastic. That's really, really very interesting tips for to be applied. I have one last question that just emerged while you were speaking. It's similar to the former one, but it's more like have you ever worked in companies where like strategic choices made by the business are not truly customer centric, but rather based on individual ideas about something and about where to go? And what strategies can you put in place in order to reverse the situation if this is the case?
Yep, I have. I think that that's human nature where folks sometimes will fall in love with a solution and not be as focused on the actual problem that you're trying to solve, or solutions that are better. So that's one of the things that I try to practice. I spent many years at Intuit, a company that was really good about anchoring on the customer problem. So that helped me develop, techniques to be able to, again, refocus people on the customer problem. And we used to have the saying, which was like, fall in love with the customer problem, not with the solution. So again, I think a lot of it is trying to go back and get that person to articulate the problem. And if you feel like that problem is a valid customer problem or a valid, business opportunity, and you feel strongly that there might be better solutions than the one that they might actually be really attached to, you then have to try and find ways to see like, okay, where is this person in terms of level of attachment to their own solution? Would they be open to spending the 2 hours ideating what else could solve that problem? If they're not, are they open to at least ideating how to expand on their chosen solution, right, to make it better? So you really have to assess like different ways of getting in there. But if you can get them to instead refocus on the customer problem or the business opportunity and let go of the very specific solution that they're attached to, then that can work really well. in this regard. The other thing that also helps is asking questions like, okay, that's great. This is what you want to build. Let's really define how we're going to measure success. Like, how are we going to know that we're successful? That's another way of sometimes getting back to like refocusing on the problem, because the success metrics will have to be about, right, the things that the solution is solving versus about the solution itself. So anything that you can do either on the success metrics or on reframing it back to the customer problem, I think can be really effective. There are times where, even with all of that, you may have someone who's really attached to a solution. I've been in situations like that where, like, for instance, the CEO felt really strongly about a specific solution, and despite all of our best attempts, they still felt pretty strongly about it. And then I think the best that you can do is just figure out, like, how do we collect customer feedback along the way? If that's the solution that we're going to have to ship anyway, then how do we make it the best that it can be so that it has the best chance of actually both solving customer problems and delivering value for the business?
Great. Thank you very much, Daniela. I have one last question that emerged right now. And it's much more related to the relationship with your team. So basically, people are asking, how can you determine how much influence you to put into the decision process in design teams? So in a way, how much do you delegate a design decision, and how much do you enter into them? And when you delegate and when you enter into them more directly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think it's a delicate balance, right? Similar to what I was mentioning, where I actually get involved in a couple of projects myself.
Yeah.
There's always that delicate balance of also making sure that my design leader, the designers on the team, et cetera, also have a certain level of autonomy, right? They're viewed as the main contributors in terms of their business partners who they have strong relationships with. So it's always a delicate balance. What I find is most important is, and this is going to sound like a broken record, but is you need to have a strong relationship with your team, and you need to have a foundation of trust so that you can actually have healthy debate. And that happens like throughout my day with my team members, where I want everyone to come in with a really strong perspective, a really strong opinion on things. And then let's debate it, and like, let's tear it apart. Literally before this call, I was having an exchange on Slack with one of my leaders. And he was like, well, I agree maybe 70% with what you're saying. And here's where, I see gaps in your thinking. And like, that's exactly the kind of environment and atmosphere that you want to create. Because the reality is none of us are right 100% of the time, right? And we're much better when we're all contributing, when we're calling each other out, when we're pointing gaps, when we're building on great ideas. So it really comes down to building that foundation of trust. Again, making everyone see and feel like we're all there because we have the same goals. It's not a personal thing, right? It's about like making the thing better, so that you can actually have these really healthy debates, and create the best possible work.